This episode of the Hunt Stealth podcast is brought to you by ReadyWise Outdoor.
As a hunter and outdoor enthusiast, you need food that's not just convenient, but also nutritious. That's why I trust ReadyWise Outdoor. Their pro meals are designed to fuel your adventure, packed with over 30 grams of protein and more than 500 calories per serving, keeping you energized when you need it the most. Favorites like the Thai coconut cashew curry or the protein-packed breakfast skillet are not only delicious, but ready in minutes. Just add water. Plus, their freeze-dried technology keeps these meals lightweight, which are perfect for extended trips. Whether you're deep in the backcountry or preparing for a weekend camping trip, ReadyWise has your back with meals that give you the stamina you need to go the extra mile. Their meals are made locally here in the U.S. and come with a 15-year shelf life. So head on over to ReadyWiseOutdoor.com today and explore their pro meal bundles, because your outdoor pursuits deserve great tasting, high-quality meals. And be sure to enter promo code Ryan20 to save 20% off at checkout. That's Ryan20 to save 20% off at ReadyWiseOutdoor.com.
Need a cooler that keeps your food and drinks ice cold on your next adventure? Look no further than Blue Coolers from Caddis Sports. With the industry-leading insulation and rugged durability, these coolers are perfect for camping trips, tailgates, and all of your outdoor adventures. The built-in wheels make transportation a breeze, no matter how heavy the load. Whether you're fishing, hosting a barbecue, or at deer camp, Blue Coolers has you covered with unmatched performance at an affordable price. Blue Coolers are made right here in the USA, so get yours today at caddissports.com. Be sure to use promo code Ryan10 to save 10% off at checkout. That's Ryan10 to save 10% off at caddissports.com.
You're listening to the Hunt Stealth Podcast with Ryan Uffens, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the wild. Whether you're an aspiring hunter or an adventurer seeking the untamed, together we'll explore the strategies and stories that lead to success in the great outdoors.
It is Ryan Uffens here with the Hunt Stealth Podcast. We are sitting down with Gabe Robinson today. He is a hunter, a believer, and a man who's got a lot on his plate right now, but we're grateful that he was able to make some time to sit down and join us on the podcast here. Gabe, thanks for being here, brother. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing good. Yeah, long day at work. Just super stoked I could make it work to be on the night.
Good. Well, hey, glad to have you here. Hey, I want to jump into it. I know you and I had talked briefly before, but you weren't somebody that was raised hunting. I mean, it wasn't something that you did like on the regular like you're doing now. Tell me about that transition and how that kind of became, the passion that you're pursuing now.
Yeah, so growing up, I did a lot with agriculture, and I was just around animals a lot. And we had 5 acres of woods. So I grew up just running around in the woods. Every now and then, my dad would be able to take a blacktail off our property. We have coyotes. Growing up, didn't hunt like you said, but just loved the outdoors and loved animals. Knew I really wanted to get into hunting. In high school, I did a little bit of duck hunting. I was lucky enough to shoot a nice blacktail buck off of my back porch when I was 15, which was super cool. That was my first ever experience actually harvesting an animal. And then, I really knew I wanted to get into it when Meat Eater kind of was a big thing. Watching Steve Rinella do his thing, I was like, man, that looks just so cool to be out there in nature and be able to harvest animals. And I knew I loved wild game meat, and I was like, I want to do that. And so when I graduated high school, which was in 2020 during COVID actually, which was its own wild thing, I knew I wanted to hunt, and I picked Montana State University in Bozeman because I was like, I've heard Montana has like some of the best hunting in the U.S. So I ended up going there, spent about a year there just watching other people hunt because I didn't want to pay $1,200 for a tag out of state. So I just went along with people who I met who were into hunting, went scouting with them, watched them archery hunt, and was like, this is definitely something I really want to get into. And when I first, like my very, very first season, I went to a pawn shop actually, and I bought a Remington 700 7 mag, and I had a Vortex scope that was on my 22, took it off my 22, put it on my 7 mag, went and sighted it in at 100 yards, because that's really all I'd ever shot. I'd never shot further. Downloaded Onyx, bought a subscription, looked around, found some public land, went there pretty much every single evening, because I had been told it was a decent spot by a friend. And then after probably 25 days into that spot, I shot a decent little 4x2 mule deer, which was my first buck. And I was just instantly hooked after that. I mean,
So tell me, Gabe, tell me a little bit about that first mule deer. Like where were you at? How did it go down? Like walk me through the process.
So I found this spot, like I said, from a friend. I'd gone there a little bit before season, and I'd actually seen quite a few like sizable, probably 120 to 140 inch mule deer bucks up in a bachelor group during what would have been archery season, but I didn't have a bow at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was freaking out, texting all my buddies, texting my one buddy who sent me that pin. I had pictures. I like photography, so I had a really nice camera with me. So I was taking photos. I'd also seen an elk on that piece and a turkey. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And being from Washington, I wasn't used to big tracts of public land. And this was only a 1x1 mile, so 1 square mile piece of land, which is tiny, but it's 600 acres. Like I think it's 640 acres, which is a very small piece of land in the grand scheme of things, but was huge to me. I walked every inch of that place over my season. And I had found just this super well-used game trail. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go sit that. And I remember there was this thick sage and it rolled up. So you'd park your truck, walk up a hill, and then it kind of plateaued, dipped back down and up. And the backside was a wheat field. And right on the edge of that wheat field was the end of the property that you could hunt. So I remember that night specifically, I had parked, I walked the game trail like I always walk, and I actually stopped before where I would normally stop and glassed back behind me, saw one doe, and just kind of sat and watched her, and she seemed fine, wasn't like in heat. So I was like, okay, I don't think they're going to be down here. I assume they're going to be back where I had seen them before. There was one little, I called him Crabs because I saw him there almost every time I went. He was probably 4 inches tall on each antler, 4 inches of antler on each side with a tiny little fork, looked like crab claws. So I called him Crabs. I saw him a lot. That was actually some pretty cool game cam pictures of him, which was cool. And so I remember getting up over the next ridge and sitting on it and just glassing. And I remember I was just flipping. I always carry a Bible with me. So I was reading my Bible. And I remember sitting there, turning page, reading, kind of glassing for a little bit, reading, glassing. And I look up one time and I'm like, holy crap, there's a deer. And it's maybe 400 yards from me. And I see it in this thick timber. There's a big timber thicket. And it's walking down towards me. And it's getting chilly. It's cold. It's starting to get dark. The sun had just set. So I'm like, okay, I got 30 minutes maybe to make a move on this deer. So I grabbed my gear.
How far away did you say you think he was from you?
About 400 yards. And at that time,
yards.
I was not confident shooting anything more than 200.
Got it.
And he was feeding. He was walking kind of fast, so I didn't really know what to do. I just kind of freaked out, and I just was like, "Oh my gosh! There's actually a buck. Like there's a shooter."
It's like it's happening.
It's happening. I know. I was losing my mind over it, and I ended up coming around, and he was kind of in a not a bowl, but there's definitely that game trail that was super well used is what he was on. So I kind of roughly knew where he was going to pop out. Yeah, coming down a ravine. And I knew nothing about thermals at the time. Thinking back on it now, I'm like, oh, I should have moved the opposite direction. But I moved straight towards him pretty much to try to get as close as possible to where I thought he was going to be. I'm like, we're going straight in. So I remember I had a little tiny, like 40-liter bag with me and my rifle. And I start walking towards him. I'm like glassing, taking a few steps, glassing, and it's getting colder. It's getting darker. I'm like, oh crap. Like I don't see him at all. And then I kind of turn around to like look back way further than I thought he would have moved in that time. And he's 80 yards from me. And I'm like, oh crap. Luckily didn't see me at all, but I'm standing in the middle of the open sagebrush. So I'm like,
frozen.
I'm like, oh crap. I can't do anything. There's this bigger pine tree about 5-10 yards from me. So I start kind of walking backwards super slowly to get to it. And I step on a branch right as I'm getting set up. And I'm like, oh crap. And he just snaps his head to me and he's staring straight at me. And I just raise my rifle and take a shot. And I remember just as soon as I took that shot, like everything just paused, and I saw him drop in his tracks. And I actually have the video on my Instagram. I'm just like breathing like this. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, thank you, God. Thank you, Lord. I'm so thankful. And I was like, he's down. He's down. He was moving a little bit, but he was down. He wasn't going to get back up. And I was just so thankful. And I just sat there just in that moment for like 5 minutes of like, my heart was racing. I'm like, my dream had come true. I had found public land on my own, self-taught hunting. I was like, there's no way this is happening. I actually shot a buck. I have friends in Washington who have hunted 5+ years and never shot a buck. I'm losing my mind about this. And the sun was, like I said, it was already set. So it was getting dark. It was kind of that blue light time where you can still see perfectly fine, but in about 10 minutes, you're not going to be able to see it all.
Yeah.
And I walked straight up to him, and he actually, unfortunately, wasn't dead. I'd spined him, which dropped him in his tracks. And so I dispatched of him with my handgun that I had on me, and he was dead. And I actually then realized I don't know how to quarter out a deer. I had never killed a deer in a position where I'd have to quarter it out and actually pack it out. Everything had been in my backyard, and we just drug it out. And I'm about 1.5 miles from my truck, or about 1 mile from my truck, I think, because I was on the very far corner of the property, so diagonally across pretty much. I was like, well, crap. Looked at my bag. I didn't have game bags with me. I had a pocket knife, and the bag I had was, like I said, a 40-liter Sitka flash bag that I bought off Facebook Marketplace for $100. So I was like, I pretty much have a school backpack, a pocket knife, a rifle, and a dead deer. And I'm like, well, this is going to suck. And so
not a terrible situation.
Yeah, I had a dead deer.
You got a dead deer.
I wasn't upset at all. So I knew how to gut him, so I gut him, and I love heart meat, so I keep the heart, throw the heart in my pack, and I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I actually cut off the legs at the joints, and I was gonna skin them out, but then I'm like, by this time I have my headlamp on. I'm dark. I'm cutting it up in the dark. I'm like, crap, there's a ton of coyotes here. Like, I know they're here. So I end up wrapping him in.
They're just waiting for you to be like, well, maybe I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah. I end up wrapping him in my orange vest, roll him kind of half up the hill, and then roll him over me. And I use my rifle sling. I put his neck through my rifle sling and then his hindquarter through my rifle sling, have my rifle on my thighs, and I'm just walking 100, 200 yards, taking a break. Walking 100, 200 yards, taking a break. And when we ended up skinning him, he had about a ½ inch of fat on him. And he was full rut, full fat, thick neck mule deer that you see on like a postcard. That was him.
Right.
Not a big rack, but he was big bodied for sure. Ended up rolling my ankle, and it was like a 2.5, 3 hour pack out to go 1 mile. I get him to my truck, and I'm just singing praise to the Lord. I actually had worship music playing when I pack out. That's kind of a tradition of mine. If I have a pack out in the dark, I play worship music.
That's awesome.
Playing worship music when I got to my truck, and I'm just huffing and puffing. And I actually, at one point, I had thought I had broke his antler, because when I had to throw him over the fence, because there's a tiny little gate that you can't really fit a deer through. I thought I broke his antler. Luckily, I didn't. And I ended up getting him to my house, and living in Montana at the time. It was, I think, November. So the temperatures were very chilly, and I ended up getting to hang him for a few days before cutting him up. And I'm so thankful my parents actually ended up flying out. I shot him on a Friday. My parents ended up flying out, and my dad loves to butcher animals. Like, that's his thing. Loves to cook, loves to butcher. So he helped me do the whole butcher process. I bought a meat grinder, bought a vacuum sealer, and froze it all. And I had meat in the freezer, and I was as happy as could be. And my dad and I do my own Euro mounts. That's my favorite style of mount. And so we Euro mounted it the same day we cut him up, and I had him on the wall. And I actually have him tattooed on my shoulder right here.
Oh, wow.
With the coordinates, which is funny. People are always like, somebody's going to steal your spot. And I'm like, I don't really care. It's not that great of a spot. But
They're
yeah,
gonna have to really pay attention to that
yeah,
ink, man, to get the
that was
coordinates
my
there.
first mule deer ever
That's
that I
neat.
got, and that was one of the most amazing hunts because, like I said,
That's an incredible story, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's wild sometimes. I mean, some people think you just go walk up and there are some people that do just find something, sit, wait, pull the
Mhm.
trigger, and then go grab it. But like you said, you've got the sun starting to set. You're by the time you get up there and get them gutted out and dispatched and ready to go, it's like, all right, how am I going to get this thing out here?
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
mean, you gotta get your hands dirty, roll them up, toss them on your shoulder, and you don't look like a guy to me that skips leg day. So I'm
No,
I'm
can't skip leg day, man.
I'm sure that was a lot of fun. But the reward that comes from that, I mean, I've talked about it. We've gone out and we've got skunked time after time, but the effort that we're putting in, and the experience that we're gaining is it's pretty neat, and it's interesting. Like, you learn something every time, but that conditioning that you have to put yourself through to be ready to go and do that. I mean, you might not have had like this crazy backcountry pack out, but throwing 185 pound deer on your back and hoofing over a mile back to your truck, like, that takes some effort. That takes some mental fortitude that I think a lot of people kind of don't forget about. That's why every day I go to the gym, I try and, at least between one of my sets, I grab 245 pound plates and I just do a walk around the gym. Just get used to those old farmer carries.
Oh yeah,
Get used to
oh yeah.
grinding. So, well, that's cool, man. I appreciate you sharing that story with us. That's impressive. Yeah, I'm still looking forward to getting my first mule deer. One of these days, I'll be able to share my own story on here. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear
But
it.
but you had another successful hunt recently.
Hmm.
You got an antelope,
Yeah,
correct?
yes, I did.
Tell me a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Yeah, so if we want to talk about effort to that feeling of reward, I got to start with my first two antelope that I ever shot. I was lucky enough to draw a tag for a decent unit, a B tag for a decent unit, and then a buck tag for a not so great unit. Ended up hunting 2 days, and I had rifle tags. And antelope with a rifle, if you have a good unit and you see an antelope, you're most likely going to be able to kill it. This was about 2 years into my hunting career. I'd gotten a lot more confident with western ranges and shooting out to 400, 500 yards. And so I went out and I'd been out with my buddies archery antelope hunting in the unit that I drew a B tag in. And in about an hour from the time I left my house, I had a dead antelope in the back of my truck. One of the easiest hunts I've ever been on. And then the next day I went out to go fill my buck tag, completely new spot I'd never been to. And that I shot a pretty small buck, but it was the only day I was going to have to hunt. But 2 days, less than 10 hours of hunting total, and I had two antelope. And I was like, man, this is kind of easy. Um, I was like, this is just too easy. I was like, the reward wasn't there. And I'll admit, I was driving around in my truck, and if I saw him on the road, hike at him, close the distance, and shoot him, and that was it. And so I was like, I want to do
Hey,
archery.
Gabe, let me ask you a question. So you got those two antelope. How do you like the meat?
One of my favorites. One of antelope is one of my favorite game meat, and a lot of people don't like it. It's because you're not cooking it right, or it's because you're letting it get too warm. Like you hunt antelope usually earlier in the year, and so it's warm out still. And their hide, if you like feel their fur, they got 3 inches of fur on them. Like, you gotta skin them down as fast as possible and cool that meat off, or it won't spoil, but it'll get real gamey. And
Gamey.
then you got to make sure you get the glands out of them on their legs when you're gutting them and clean them, because otherwise you're going to grind that into the meat and it just kind of tastes gamey and rancid. But if you get them cooled off fast and if you cook them right, they are one of the most tender meats I've ever had. They're phenomenal.
Have you got a special dish you like to do? Like, anything in particular? I mean, I'm not asking for the recipe, but I mean, do you do a roast? Do you do like a slow cooker? Do you just cut up some medallions, toss them on a grill? Like, what's your go-to with those?
My go-to with antelope, I think the tenderloins and backstraps are obviously the best cuts. but I like the top round of an antelope. And if you take it, you can actually wrap it in bacon and smoke it, and it's just as good as any backstrap cut you'll have. That's one of my favorite dishes. Or antelope stuffed bell peppers is another great thing to do with just ground antelope. It's just delicious.
Now we're talking. Okay.
It's
now
so
went a
good.
different direction. I wasn't thinking.
Stuffed
Yeah.
bell peppers with game meat it's great because you still get the flavor of the actual game meat because you don't put a ton of seasoning on it. So yeah, I'd been lucky enough and blessed to have a very successful and very easy hunt with 2 antelope. And then I put in for the archery antelope tag, which was archery only. And I'm like, man, this is my first year bow hunting. Let's go for antelope. They were easy last time. Not the same. Not at all. I hunted my tail off the following season with that archery tag and had 1 shot, I think, no, 2 shots at antelope, both of which I completely missed. An antelope was actually the first big game animal I ever took a shot at with my bow. Completely missed it. I had a 5-pin sight, but in that moment, it was 1 pin, and I was just racing. My heart was going, it's such a different feeling. It was amazing. And so come this season, which has been my 3rd season antelope hunting, 2nd with a bow, I go out for opening, or the 2nd week. So the week after opening, I go out and spend a whole week chasing antelope. And it's 100 degrees, 102 to 97 degrees during the day. And you're stalking them all day long, finding tons of antelope, seeing lots of them, just anywhere with water, anywhere with kind of rolling hills, and then near ag, you'll find antelope just crawling all over the place. They're moving around throughout the day. I think I put 3 stalks in on the same buck in one day because I just kind of kept coming back to them. They'll forget about you. They're not the smartest animals. And then the day I actually harvested an antelope was I was heading back to Montana to go elk hunting, and I kind of had a little bit extra time one morning to go out. So I find some spots that look decent on Onyx. I camp by one, and I get up, crisp morning. I'm like, this is going to be great. I'm going to hunt for 3 or 4 hours for antelope, and then hike straight in and go elk hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So I end up driving to the first spot. It's like sun hasn't even risen yet. I'm just light enough so you can see. Drive down this long road that's bordering these hills. Get out, hike up the hills, glass a little bit, come back down to my truck, drive to the end of the road, and I don't see anything. And I'm like, that's okay. I have 4 more pins that I'm going to hit on my way to my elk spot. I'm like, that's fine. I turn my truck in a U-turn, and as soon as I turn around, I see this silhouette of an antelope, probably 600 yards up on this hill. And I'm like, that looks so cool. So I actually grabbed my camera out and zoomed in. I have a telephoto lens on a Canon, I think it was the Canon R7. Take a couple photos of him, and he's just standing there. And actually, I'll show you the photo on the stream if you guys are watching this on YouTube, because it's such a cool thing to have the photo of an antelope just like sitting there on a silhouette like that. Yeah, you can kind of see he's just sitting there up on the ridge.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I zoom in on that photo. I'm like, oh, he's a buck. I'm like, oh, I'll go give it a try. So I get out of my truck. It's still that kind of blue light, early morning. I'm like, okay, this is fine. So I hop the fence, hop the creek, go up the hill. And this is mid-September, so they're in rut. So I know they're going to be pretty active. And he was a solo buck, so most likely going to be a little skittish is what I was thinking. Well, I get up and over, and he sees me right away. I was like, oh, crap. He's like 85 yards from me. I'm like, I'm not going to take a shot if he's looking at me like that. He starts just blowing at me like crazy, walks straight towards me another 15 yards, still blowing. I'm just sitting still. I'm just imagining that I am a bush. I'm like, I'm a bush. I'm just a sage bush. Go away. You don't see anything. I'm nothing. I'm not even here. He stares at me for maybe 10 minutes total. By the end of it, I'm moving around. I grab my binos out, and I'm glassing the ag field probably half a mile past him. End up seeing another herd of antelope, and I'm like, well, there's most likely a buck with them. So I sit and look at it a little bit more. One stands up, and I see it has horns, and I'm like, oh, that's a decent buck. I'm like, I'm going to go after him. The antelope that was blowing at me had kind of lost interest, but he was walking that way. I'm like, oh crap! I need to get in between them. I need to cut him off so he doesn't go tell him that there's a human here. And So I dropped back over this ridge, and by this time the sun had risen. It's decently bright out. I'm like, crap, I'm going to be completely silhouetted on this ridge. So I drop a little bit further back down, and I'm like, I like to do what I call taking inventory when I'm stalking antelope with a bow, which is where I just kind of just creep over just enough, and I'll belly crawl up the ridge just to keep glassing them. Just because they move so often, I want to make sure I'm actually stalking into the right spot, because there's been a couple times where I stalk in and then I look behind me and they're 30, 40 yards to the right of where I saw them 20 minutes ago. I'm like, well, I'm just going to kind of keep doing that. And so I go up over to do that, and I see that original buck standing kind of, the ridge goes up and over, and he's just standing right at the bottom of that. And I'm like, oh, he doesn't see me yet. So I kind of stand up and walk, like sneak a little bit closer, and he starts taking a piss. And I'm like, oh, he's not going to move. So I grab my rangefinder, range him at 66 yards. I draw back, and he's quartering towards, and on antelope, I like to aim for where the white corner ends. So there's a kind of a white patch, and it ends on their right in that pocket on their shoulder pocket, pretty much right where their vitals are.
Right.
Oh, I'm just going to put my pin right there and drill him. I have a dial sight, so I dialed the 66, drew back. He's still taking a piss, and I just let my back tension go through, hit my release, watch my arrow fly through my sight, and I can see him kind of spin towards me. He hears my bow go off, and he spins towards me, and I'm like, oh no, like I'm going to miss because he's going to spin.
He jumps it.
They don't really duck. They'll spin around. They'll
Pivot.
Hit you with a little 360.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh crap. And I just hear this.
So he went from kind of being like quartered away from you to he hears that arrow fly, and he turns back towards you.
No, he was kind of facing towards me already. So he went from quartering towards to almost frontal.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he's looking towards me.
He's quartering towards you, and then it's like just almost like a front-on shot.
Yeah, almost a complete frontal shot. And I'm like, oh crap! Like I thought I was gonna miss because he kind of moved a lot, and I just hear like a crack, like it sounded like my arrow hit a rock, just. And he just jumps up, and I can see the blood spray from him. I was like, oh, I drilled him. And he runs probably 40, 50 yards and dies in maybe 15 to 30 seconds. Ran, did his little spin, got dizzy, laid over and died. And I am freaking out. This is my first bow kill ever on an antelope that I've been trying to harvest an antelope buck.
Dude, those things spook so easy too. Dude. So I mean, the fact that you were able to draw back at 66 yards to even put an arrow on him is impressive.
Yeah, I had earlier this year. I had a few bucks one at 53 yards that I drew back on, and by the time I hit my back wall, he was at 80, and then one at 70 yards that I drew back on, and he just knew I was there. I didn't make a sound. I drew back on, I hit my back wall, and I looked through my sight, and I'm like, where'd he go? He's just gone. Yeah. So they're spooky. They see you, and the first thing they do is create distance. But I said,
this one, it worked out. Yeah, he's like, all right, well, I'm going to handle my business.
He was relaxed doing his business. I'm like, I'm going to capitalize on this.
So when you got up there, where did it actually hit him?
So I ended up hitting him at the base of the neck. My arrow didn't even go into his chest cavity. It went straight into the shoulder away from me, into that shoulder knuckle, right where your front shoulder,
into the joint,
right into that joint. Actually, when I cut him up, it split that joint perfectly in half. Like one spot you don't want to hit, but because I hit him in the neck, I'm pretty sure I severed every single artery. Because when I was gutting him, his trachea was completely severed. So he was bleeding out. He was not getting oxygen. There was foamy blood all over the place. I don't want to be too graphic, but he was bleeding a lot. He died of blood loss very quickly. I was shooting a 2-inch mechanical, and it performed perfectly. His shoulder where it hit looked like I had shot him with a rifle. Like the carnage was insane.
I've seen some of the photos on your Instagram. Like, I mean, it's you can see some of the. You can see the opening where it kind of went through and just you see that, and with one of those mechanical heads, man, it just would have opened him up. Can I
show the shoulder on here? Will that be?
Yeah, you can show it.
There's the shoulder. cavity. That all the bright red is the damage it did.
Okay.
And then the entry wound, that was the entry wound, a 2-inch slice straight into his neck.
Okay.
It was my first time ever shooting mechanicals and my first time ever shooting an animal. And I was very impressed with how fast my bow killed an animal. I've heard of people shooting an antelope with a bow and tracking it 5 miles, and even on a good shot, like hitting one lung, which is typically a decent shot. And so I was just freaking out. And I remember I grabbed my phone to call my dad, because he bow hunts too, and he was so excited for me to get an antelope because he'd really never tried antelope meat before. So I go to call my dad, and I click call, and it's ringing, and my buddy Isaac picks up, and I'm like, "What, Isaac?" He's like, "Yeah, like what's up?" I'm like, "Dude, I just shot an antelope," like just freaking out. And it's funny because he was actually the guy I was archery antelope hunting with the year before, and he's huge into archery as well. He helped me so much in my archery journey. So really ironic that I called him because he's helped me so much as a hunter, way more experience than I was. He was so stoked for me. Super cool just to get to share that moment with him. And then I ended up calling my dad. My dad was super proud of me as well, and was really excited to do a Euro mount on an antelope because he's never done one. And so, yeah, I was.
So not to completely shift gears, but maybe, well, we'll come back on this, but you do Euro mounts yourself?
Yeah. I actually have professionally done Euro mounts for a few years too.
Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute here.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you get a hold of your dad, and he was super proud.
Super proud, super excited. He knew how much time I'd put in already this year. And even though this was kind of an opportunistic, I have some free time, I'm going to go antelope hunt. I was just beyond excited and so glad that I was able to harvest one. Because even though I didn't shoot an elk on my elk hunting trip, I was able to come home with an antelope and not empty-handed, which is hard. It's hard to come home empty-handed. But like I was talking about earlier, just that feeling of the reward when you spend hundreds of hours out in the field hunting to not get anything, and then you finally achieve something, there's nothing like it. The adrenaline, the gratification, it just blows every other thing out of the water. And that's why for you, Ryan, I can't wait to hear your first story, because you're going to be just mind boggled by the feeling of it. And it's going to feel so good because of the time and energy you've already put in and invested in it.
Yeah, we've got a couple of friends that have been doing it themselves. One of my daughter's friends, actually, he's gotten 2 elk archery. He took a second one this year, and it's a monster. And that's Abe Salmon, and he's out right now. He's out trying to get a mule deer right now here in Utah, and we're gonna have him on the podcast as well. But he's going to take, my son's got a OTC elk tag, and he thinks he's got a spot where we can go get one. We got to wait for a little bit more snow to hit, so we'll push him down the canyon. But I don't have a tag this year. My boy does. We're going to see if we can't get his filled. Neither one of us have taken anything yet, so we're going to go out there. And then I got another buddy. We grew up, our kids played baseball together. His son is actually a guide up in Wyoming. He does guided hunts up there. But yeah, so Shane Tueller, who's a pilot, he's going to take my son and I out as well. So we got a couple options. I think with these 2 people that have been doing it a long time, that have the experience and know-how, and I've been talking to them, telling them about the podcast, and they're like, we're going to get it done for you. So yeah, so we're looking forward to getting out there and getting it done. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a ton of fun for my boy to be able to do that. And yeah, so
dude, I can't wait to hear about that. I'm headed to Montana for mule deer hunt over Thanksgiving for that week. And I'm actually taking a good buddy of mine from high school who moved to Montana with me, taking him out, and he's never shot a deer before. So I'm almost more excited to try to get him his first deer than I am to go try to shoot a deer, because I want to be able to pass on the knowledge I've learned, even though I've only been hunting for 3 years, doing it myself, and the connections I've made. The learning curve has been shortened substantially for me, 100%. And so
it's super cool. The community, there's another guy that's helping, with our merch line, and that his name's Dustin Green. He called me yesterday and he's like, I'm going to come out. He goes, he's like, all glass, all fine. It's pretty cool seeing how people are willing to kind of come out of the woodwork to help you go, have a successful hunt and
Yeah.
be able to fill your freezer. And for us, obviously not a trophy hunter. Right now, we just want to get some meat in the freezer, and
That's what it's about.
we're looking forward to that. I've had a couple buddies that have given me some elk meat that they've taken before, and that in and of itself has got me, stoked to go try and take an animal. But right now, where we're at, I would be surprised if we didn't fill our freezer this year. So so we're gonna take him out, and he's doing the archery, he's doing the extended, so. That's
awesome.
why we just got to wait for that for a little bit more snow to hit and push him down the mountain a little bit. But
that's gonna be so cool.
That's cool. Hey, when we were talking a little bit earlier, just to get back talking about you, because nobody wants to hear about me. I'm boring as all get out. We were talking a little bit, and your dad had taken a bear, or was it you?
I shot a bear this season as well. I was actually in my yard, same exact spot that I shot my first blacktail.
Okay, talk to me a little bit about that. Just kind of walk through that. How did that pan out?
So in Washington, I had a bear tag because my dad, once I left, he got really into bear hunting, or kind of my tail into high school. He got really into bear hunting. I actually wasn't really interested in it at that time. My older brother did it with him. My dad got.
This is black bear, correct?
Yeah, black bear.
Got it.
In Washington, there's no spring bear season, but you can get 2 black bear tags a year. And so my dad has had a really good track record. I think he's harvested 2 a year for the past 2 years. And so he's been super, super blessed to have bear meat in the freezer. And where we hunt is there's just all it is blackberries. And then there's some private land that's a huge apple orchard. So they taste great because all they're eating is berries and apples.
They feast all day long.
All day long. And bears, they taste what they eat like. One year, my dad shot a bear during the salmon run, and that meat was the worst thing I had ever tasted in my life. It just tasted like rotten fish. So we pretty much try to hunt the earlier portion of the season. It opens August 1st in Washington. So I'd gone out a few times. I was like,
let them hibernate, burn off some of that fish fat, get rid of that rotten fish smell, and then they come out and they start looking for all the fresh fruits and berries that's starting to pop up. Oh, yeah, it makes sense. I hadn't thought about that, but as you're saying, I'm like, well, that makes sense,
Yep. They completely eat what they taste, or taste what they eat like. And so this bear was in our neighborhood. We don't live in a neighborhood. We got 5 acres, but there's a few other houses kind of close by.
Sure.
And we'd seen him once last year. I put up a game cam because I was mowing the lawn. I was like, this isn't deer poop. This looks like giant coyote poop or bear poop. But then there's a bunch of like blackberry seeds. I'm like, this is bear poop. There's a bear nearby. So I put this trail cam up, and I'd actually had the trail cam up for about a month. No sign of a bear on there at all. Lots of squirrels, possums, raccoons, deer. Like, where's this bear? Like, where? He's got to be around here. And I get home from work one night, and I'm just hanging out, and I look outside, and I'm like, what is that? I'm like, is that a stump? There's this giant black mass near our apple tree, and I'm like, that's a bear. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh crap, there's a bear in our yard. I'm like, sweet. So I grab my rifle, I go out, and we have kind of an overhang on our porch, and they're supported by 4x4 beams. So I put my hand on a 4x4 beam, rested my rifle, and I'm like, I know that range. It's 55 yards. I practice it often with my bow. Wish I would have grabbed my bow, but it was in the shop. So I set my rifle, aim in, take a shot, boom, let one off, and he just instantly jumps up and mule kicks. And I am instantly filled with dread because I forgot that my rifle's zeroed at 200 yards. And I don't know why I was thinking this, but I'm thinking I just shot low and missed. I'm like, oh crap. So I walk over, and there's no blood at all. And I'm just like, oh no, this isn't good. So I'm thinking I missed. I'm thinking I mishit. And then I think about it for a second. And I'm like, well, a 200-yard zero and a 50-yard zero should be relatively identical, actually, in point of impact. And I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I aimed dead on, shooting the same bullets I've shot for years. Like, my rifle loves these bullets. I'm like, I'm gonna go track a a little bit. There's a huge hole in the blackberry bushes where he ran. Can't find a lick of blood. So I'm kind of walking around, looking around, and the tracks just like, he kind of like went down. We have a huge ravine. So he went down the ravine and then cut right straight at the neighbor's property. And I'm like, oh no, he went onto the neighbor's property. They got little dogs. They don't like hunting really. Like they'd be pretty pissed if there's a dead bear in their yard because of me. And we don't have the greatest relationship.
Surprise.
Yeah. I'm like, so I'm like, oh crap, they're going to be in a neighbor's yard. And I'm like looking around. I'm like, there's no blood. I go back. I find deep paw prints. And it's getting a little bit darker out. I'm like, crap. Did I miss? And then I look down the hill a little bit, and there's this broken over tree, and I'm like, that looks for like fresh as rotten stump that was just kind of like exploded, not like torn apart by a bear, but looked like a bear had kind of like a linebacker had just pile drived it. I'm like, what? And I look right beneath that.
Put the shoulder through it, right?
Yeah, underneath the lip of that is the bear, and I'm like, sweet. I'm like poking him. I'm like, he's dead. Wasn't a huge bear, maybe a 180-pound black bear, so pretty average black bear. This is maybe 15, 20 yards from where I shot it, actually. He just kind of ran down and around. So I drag him back up, and I'm like feeling him out. I don't feel like an exit hole. Usually with my 7 mag, I got like a 3 or 4 inch wound channel. Like that thing just fragments and just demolishes anything that it hits. And I'm like, what happened here? End up getting through. My bullet didn't expand. I pencil holed straight through. But my shot was right in the top half of his heart. My bullet went straight through the top of his heart. It was really interesting. The entry wound and exit wound were 7 millimeters. But on the exit wound, there was about a 4-inch bruise, perfect circular bruise from the concussion caused by the rifle. I was like, this is insane. He didn't bleed at all. I just pretty much cut his heart from his body internally with where like luckiest shot placement ever.
Wow.
Like he was dead. If I would have shot an inch to the left or an inch to the right, he probably would have lived and been perfectly fine because I pretty much shot him with a field point. And I was just floored. I was like, no way. And
that's wild.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that before.
I'd had it happen one other time on my antelope that I shot with my rifle. I shot the antelope buck. Actually, funny enough, I shot the antelope buck closer than I shot my archery buck. Shot the antelope buck at 54 yards with my rifle, and it pencil holed straight through. And I ended up he got up and kept running, and I ended up having to shoot him again. So I kind of figure with the bullet I'm using and with how fast that round's going at that range, it's not expanding properly. So I might look into using full copper bullets right now because I'm just using a fused core or lead core bullet right now for my rifle.
So, Gabe, from the time you shot him and you saw him take off, how long was it until you found him? I mean,
probably 25 minutes, 30 minutes.
Did you kind of like sit for a minute, just let him kind of do his thing?
I actually just grabbed my 10 mil and kind of walked out there. I'm like, if he's wounded, he's going to kind of, I assumed he might want to sit down, and he's in pretty thick stuff. So the deer I shot there ran down and broke its leg. I'm like, maybe the same thing happened. I don't know. If he's going to be in misery, it's a black bear. I felt very confident he wasn't going to attack me. And I had my 10 mil with me. I would have just lit him up with 10 mil rounds. And so I pretty much walked out there right away, which I typically don't do, I would say. But because of how I felt on the shot, I just kind of felt iffy about it, and not seeing blood at the exact point of impact. I'm like, did I miss? Because if I missed, he would have ran away. He would have been gone. They're black bears. They're scared of everything. But I was looking around for a while, trying to find blood, looking for any sign of blood. I was convinced I didn't miss, and turns out I didn't. I had a pretty much perfect shot. Like God guided my bullet there. That was, if my bullet, like I said, if it hit any other spot close by, I probably wouldn't have killed the bear. And so, like, thank the Lord that I was able to harvest a bear and not wound an animal. That's hasn't happened yet. I haven't shot an animal with a fatal injury and had to like not recovered it. And I'm dreading that day. I know that day is going to come. It happens to everybody. Bad shots happen. Not excited about when that does happen.
Yeah, dude. What from people, everyone I'm talking to, it's like the more you hunt, like it's going to happen. It was so stupid today. You think about little things that you're doing. My son and I, we ran up during lunch. We're like, hey, let's go get some target practice in. And we're up there talking, and we have our clothing line that we're launching. We're like, hey, let's get some photos. And so we're sitting there, and he's got his phone, and he's taking, and I'm taking pictures of him, and he's taking pictures of me, and he's like, hey, do that again. And I had just let like one fly, and like I draw back, and he's trying to get a picture of the shirt from the back, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I like let it go, and I hear this. It wasn't a normal sound. I know. I dry fired. I didn't even freaking knock an arrow. Fortunately, like nothing happened. Like it didn't blow up. But it sounded. I've got the Ventum.
Okay, it's a Hoyt. I was going to ask if it's a Hoyt. It's the only bows I've seen survive a dry fire perfectly is a Hoyt.
Oh, dude, I like sat there and looked through it. My knock got a little bit like turned around, but I was able to go back and kind of adjust that. And I was super freaking nervous to even draw it back. But like we sat there and I'm like, I don't see anything wrong with it. Mm-hmm. And my son's like, Dad, Jackson's like, don't shoot it. And I'm like, and then he's like, let me see it. So then he takes it and he starts looking at it. And I have to go back and see if we got video or if it was just a picture. But I was like, you dipshit. Like, it's little things like that we're up there and I've got, 6 arrows in my quiver.
Yeah.
And I had let 2 fly and like, we're like locked in and we're shooting nice, tight things. And you can let yourself go and forget about some simple things. But yeah, it was very, very fortunate that it didn't blow up. I do have some strings down with Wild Arrow that I had ordered in. They're going to restring it. So
nice.
Those guys always take good care of me down there. When I get down there, anyway, I'm taking it in soon to have it restrung. And now I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what had happened because it kind of like slapped my arm, and I've never had it slap my arm, but just like everything. Yeah, it was my bonehead move of the year so far when it comes to shooting an arrow. Like normally, like we'll be ranging something, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll like move our distance, and I'll forget, and I'll fire one like over the target, or I'll fire one like short of the target. Which still ticks me off. In the carbon fiber arrows that we shoot, like they're not cheap. No. And then whenever I do that, I always lose them too. I mean, if I short shoot it, it typically like skips into it and we see it. But whenever I fire it over, I go down to there's this legacy trail that just run. I mean, it runs all across like the Wasatch Front. But I go down on the other side of where the power lines are, and I'll go shoot down there, and I can shoot like 100, 120, 80 yards.
Oh, nice.
And you've got people, there's like a little creek that runs through there. And you've got some of the cattails that like pop up, and so it gives you a little bit of cover. And the police come down there, and they're super cool. They're like, this is where we shoot. But if somebody calls in and complains about it, like we're going to have to come tell you to pack up and leave. But
yeah, that makes sense.
Anyway, when I first started shooting, I lost many an arrow down there. And I'm shocked that I can't find them.
Yeah, dude. I do like all the Total Archery Challenge and TAC events, and I lose arrows all the time. But it's funny that, like, talk about bow catastrophes. I had a Bowtech SX80, and I was shooting it 3 days before I was leaving for my archery antelope hunt this year, actually. Drew back, and the thing I just heard it sounded like somebody had taken just a 2x4 and smacked it against a tree and shattered it. I had an arrow.
That's what mine sounded like. Yeah, it sounded like a 2x4 hit it, and I immediately knew. I'm like, shit.
Well, so I thought my release had gone off, but I'm drawing back, so my release is right next to my face. I actually completely punched myself in the nose, dropped the bow, And I'm like, what just happened? I'm looking at it. My limbs are just in pieces. I'm like, what? Like my bow is completely disassembled. Limb pockets blown out. Things just toast.
Done.
I look at it. The serving on my cable came loose, and that the little eye loop that has just slipped off mid draw with 80 pounds of because I shoot an 80-pound draw. 80 pounds of pressure just exploded in my hands, and that was terrifying.
Yeah.
So
Mine's
I've seen a guy
I've
drop
got
though.
yeah, I've got my weight at my draws at 72, which is the max it will go to.
Nice.
But yeah, and it's like the more like draw you have, the more likely that the thing is just going to blow up on you. Like the heavier the draw. I can't believe, and I don't know. I can't believe that it didn't blow up on me.
It's a Hoyt, dude. Their models go through 1,000 dry fire tests before their models ever hit the production floor. That's why that's why I switched back to Hoyt. I've shot Hoyt, Matthews, Bowtech, all three of those. And I like them all. I've also shot PSC before, like consistently shot. I like the Matthews that I shot. They're pretty robust, but it was heavy.
That's what my son shoots. He shoots a Matthews, and he loves that thing.
They're good. I think Matthews, but I think I went back to Hoyt because I'm hard on my gear. I break stuff all the time. So I'm like, I'm just going to go with Hoyt. It was my first bow ever was a Hoyt. I ended up getting the RX-7 for $1,000 with 2 releases, rest on it, and a bag. It was a killer deal for a used bow. And that thing shoots great. It fits me better, a little bit shorter axle to axle. I'm only 5'8", so I like a little bit shorter bow. I was shooting a 34 axle to axle before, and that's huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm super stoked about my Hoyt. I love it. And then funny enough, right before like 4 or 5 days before my antelope that I shot, I was drawn back. I switched to a thumb button release this season, and I was drawn back at 18 yards on probably a 220-pound chocolate, like a color phased black bear, but it was brown. It was chocolate colored black bear, 18 yards, and my release snaps. I have it all on video, and I actually haven't heard back from the company yet. Yeah, my release just completely snaps, and my arrow goes straight into the dirt at 18 yards. And I wanted to take my bow and smash it against a tree that day because it was not only 4 weeks before that, my other bow blew up. I'm like, I'm just going to quit archery hunting. This sucks. Nothing goes right.
That's
oh my gosh.
For me, that's like the first like knucklehead thing that I've done where it's like, I mean, we're like by no means influencers. We're not trying to be influencers. Like we're doing this podcast so that we can learn to be better hunters. We're, we've got this hunting lifestyle brand, Hunt Stealth that we're launching. That's just for fun. I mean, we enjoy it. This is our logo.
Yeah, I saw your post, dude. That stuff looks super cool. I need to get my hands on some of that.
We'll take care of you.
Dude. We'll talk after. But yeah, that's my release afterwards. Just completely broke.
Holy cow!
You can see it's supposed to be 2 different parts, or supposed to be 1 part. It's 2 parts.
Yeah.
I'm like that.
What release is that?
It's a knock to it, which is weird. I've shot knock on stuff like I'd say 95% of all of my archery knowledge comes from John Dudley and knock on. Best place to learn how to shoot a bow.
Yeah. I mean, look, any product is you're gonna have something that fails. So it's not.
Yeah, I don't want to.
It's not no pun intended, but it's not a knock on them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, I mean, you get stuff.
I was just super bummed. I emailed them. They were great. I'm actually listening. So Carter manufactures their releases, so I'm waiting on him to see if I can just get a replacement part for it. But yeah, I was pretty heartbroken because I would have had 2 bear this year, and they ought
to just send you out a new release.
Yeah, that's what I ideally, but even a new part because luckily enough I had a spare release. I had another release, and I just swapped the parts, and it works just fine. So I'm like, okay, I can make it work for now, but I'm definitely not necessarily thrilled about it. I'm trying to find a picture because I have a GoPro mounted to my bow, actually, where my stabilizer goes. I have a GoPro there, and I was recording on that when I took that shot, and yeah, you can see from a GoPro perspective, that's the bear. If it loads, that's how close I was.
Wow.
Yeah, I was
That looks
close to
like a
that.
big boy
Yeah,
too.
he was easily double the size of my last one, or not double,
Wow.
but one and a half times the size.
Yeah. Bigger
But yeah, I would have
nonetheless.
been. Yeah, I'm actually waiting on doing my rug. I'm going to rug out my antelope hide. I saved the hide of that one and my bear hide together. And then my dad shot a bear a few weeks ago as well, and so I'm gonna do all those hides and yeah,
That's
that'll be
awesome.
super fun.
So Gabe, over Thanksgiving, you're going out trying to get a mule deer,
Yep,
right?
me and two buddies are going to be going to eastern Montana to mule deer hunt for rifle season.
Okay. And have you got any other hunts that you're doing, or is that kind of like the topper on it for you?
Next weekend, I'm going to go out for some whitetail. My buddy's got some property over eastern Washington. Try to shoot a
Okay.
doe, just get some more meat in the freezer. And then I might try to do a cow elk hunt for a day or two while I'm over in Montana. I'm continuing my sleeve, so I'm getting my bear and my antelope because I do my first mule deer, my first whitetails here, my first blacktails on my rib cage. I'm going to do my first antelope and then my first bear on my forearm and do my whole sleeve, and then my shoulders reserved for my first bull elk that I shoot. And so I'm going to get those tattooed while I'm there, and then get that done, which will be super awesome. So might try to go out for elk hunt the day after that because I'm gonna hunt, go tattoo, and then hang out in Bozeman, see some old college buddies while I'm there as well.
Sounds like a blast, man.
It's gonna be amazing.
That's cool. Gabe, dude, best of luck to you. Super appreciate your time and appreciate the knowledge that you've imparted to our audience. Hey, so last question that I have, as you think about the grind, right? Like the effort that needs to be put into hunting, like is there, and then just in general, is there anything that you would just leave like wisdom that you would share with the audience for people that are new to hunting that you think that they could take and apply to them?
Oh gosh.
Because I mean, I know at one point you had talked about like 92 days, like you had put in like 92 days of.
Yeah. Yeah. My longest season of hunting was 92 days, not consecutively, but through one season, 92 days in the field hunting. And that was a grind. I only shot, I mean, I say only, but yeah, I only harvested 2 animals that year for 92 days. That's from the guys I know from college. They shot 5 or 6 in that time. And so trying to learn how to be efficient with your days and your time and really just be like, okay, like when I was going out that often, I would go out for an evening and just kind of mess around. I wouldn't take it seriously. Take your time seriously. It's a blessing to go out there. And so my advice would be make every second count that you're out in the field. Make every stock count. Don't half-ass a stock. If you're going to go in and if you're going to stock in on an animal or if you're going to pursue an animal, make sure that animal is going to be happy. Like you're going to be happy shooting it. If you want to shoot a bigger buck, like I don't shoot smaller bucks, or I try not to shoot like immature bucks. I try to shoot mature animals. So if you wouldn't be happy shooting a spike buck, don't go stock in on it because you're not going to put the effort in. Wait for something else. And then once you find something that you're going to be happy with, put full effort and full commitment into that so that you can know at the end of the day, like you tried your hardest. And that's the thing about hunting is like you can try your hardest and still fail. That's why when you do succeed, it's so great. So yeah, make every day count would be my advice. And then
Put in the work.
Yeah, put in the work, go to the gym, make the off season count, put in the time. I find for me, hunting is very spiritual. So I always have my Bible with me. I always try to read my Bible when I'm out there. So if you're spiritual, if you're not spiritual, go read the Bible out there. It's great. Maybe you'll find Christ. I hope you do. And so I think that's great. Involve God in hunting is like for me and for Christian hunters, and involve God in the outdoor experience too. He created this world, right?
He can lead you to him.
Exactly. He'll provide. He'll provide.
Awesome. Cool. Gabe, hey, thanks again. Really appreciate your time. For those of you that want to, in the show notes, we'll make sure and put a link to where you can find Gabe on Insta. Good luck out there, everyone. Gabe, good luck with your upcoming hunts here this fall. Keep us posted. We'd love to get an update if you get something.
Will do.
And yeah, just everyone out there, if you're out there putting in the work right now, stay after it. We're hoping you all have a successful hunt, and best wishes to everyone out there. Thanks for listening, you guys. I want to thank you for sticking around and watching the podcast. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Leave us a review, and we'd love for you to share it with your friends. Also want to tell you about Hunt Stealth. We are giving away a pheasant hunt guided experience. It's at the Pleasant Valley Hunting Preserve. Some of the world's best wired hair German pointers are going to be out there helping guide you on your pheasant hunt. You're also going to get a 1-year membership to the club, as well as Cata Sports is providing a 1-person hammock. We've got 2 tripod stools, a Northward Series backpacking tent for 1 person, a Horizon folding cot, and a 60-quart ice vault that's got on wheels. So it's super, super cool package. Also, ReadyWise, our good friends over there, are giving us 3 3-day adventure bag meal kits for you to take out for you to use on your next adventure. So head on over to huntstealth.com, and for every dollar spent, you get 1 entry into that contest. Again, thanks for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time.